The drama surrounding Nike's relationship with Caitlin Clark has quietly transformed from skepticism to something bordering on marketing brilliance. And it didn't happen with a flashy press conference or a predictable signature shoe rollout. It happened through something far more organic, far more modern, and far more dangerous for every other brand competing for relevance in basketball culture. For months, there was a growing sense that Nike didn't quite understand what they had in Caitlin Clark. There were missteps, awkward silences, strange rollouts, and moments where it felt like one of the most powerful sports brands on earth was somehow playing catch-up to a generational athlete whose popularity was outpacing their strategy. The doubt was real. The criticism was loud. And for many fans, it felt like Nike was wasting time, while the moment was already moving past them. That's what makes this pivot so impressive. Because what Nike just pulled off with the From Anywhere campaign doesn't feel like a correction. It feels like an awakening. It feels like the moment when a brand finally stops trying to mold an athlete into a predefined template and instead lets the athlete's mythology write the script. This wasn't about forcing Caitlin Clark into a slogan. It was about recognizing the one thing the entire basketball world already associates with her, and amplifying it until it becomes impossible to ignore. The centerpiece of this entire strategy is deceptively simple. Shooting from anywhere. That's it. No unnecessary narrative clutter. Just a direct acknowledgement of what people already feel when they watch Caitlin Clark play. The trailer, the visuals, the social push, all orbit around that singular idea. How about from here? The question repeats itself like a dare, like a challenge, like a smirk aimed directly at every defender who has ever underestimated her range. And in doing so, Nike didn't just create a campaign, they created a cultural prompt. What makes it even more fascinating is that this idea works even if you want to argue the details. You can say Caitlin Clark is a better passer than shooter. You can break down efficiency charts, playmaking reads, and off-ball gravity. You can talk about her vision, her timing, and her understanding of spacing. All of that can be true, and the campaign still works. Because branding isn't about being technically exhaustive, it's about being emotionally accurate. And emotionally, Caitlin Clark is range. She is audacity. She is the moment when the ball leaves her hands from a place it has no business being released. And everyone in the arena leans forward because they know it might still go in. Nike leaned fully into that feeling. And that's where the genius lies. The campaign doesn't argue with critics. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't defend her resume. It simply invites the world to try. From anywhere, can you make it from there? That's the hook. That's the challenge. And suddenly, Caitlin Clark isn't just a player you watch. She's a standard you measure yourself against. There's also an irony baked into the rollout that only strengthens the mystique. While the campaign talks endlessly about From Anywhere, international fans are stuck watching from afar, unable to even get Caitlin Clark gear in Europe. That frustration is real, and it's almost poetic. The idea of unlimited range paired with limited access creates a hunger that no ad buy could manufacture. People want what they can't easily get, and right now, Caitlin Clark merchandise exists in that exact space for global fans. The brand message is everywhere, but the product isn't, and that tension only fuels the desire further. Then comes the social layer, where the campaign truly starts to breathe on its own. When Lethal Shooter enters the conversation, whether formally disclosed as paid or not, the message gains credibility. This isn't just Nike talking to itself anymore. This is a respected shooting coach, a massive social presence, essentially throwing down a gauntlet. Get creative. Share your trick shot. Use the hashtag From Anywhere. Suddenly, this isn't a commercial. It's a movement disguised as a challenge. That's the moment where everything clicks. Because trickshot culture has always been a gateway drug to basketball fandom. It's playful. It's aspirational. It's accessible to people who may never run an offense or lock down a defender, but still want to feel connected to the game. By tying Caitlin Clark to that culture, Nike is positioning her not just as an elite player, but as a source of joy and experimentation. Basketball as imagination, not just competition. And it doesn't stop there. The campaign pulls in massive creators. People like Jesser whose audiences live and breathe this kind of content. When those creators step into the challenge, it validates the idea for millions of viewers who might not watch a full WNBA game, but will absolutely watch someone attempt a ridiculous shot from the logo. That's not accidental. That's strategic gravity. Nike understands that culture moves sideways now, not top. You don't tell people what matters. You show them who's already having fun with it. What's especially telling is how this campaign plays with nostalgia without being trapped by it. Anyone who's been around basketball long enough remembers when range became a calling card. Gimmer range wasn't just a phrase. It was a moment in time. There was a brief window where people genuinely yelled Jimmer instead of Kobe when throwing something into a bin. It didn't last, but it mattered. Then came Steph Curry, who didn't just own range but redefined the geometry of the sport. Curry didn't just make deep threes exciting, he made them normal, inevitable, and terrifying for defenses. Now, Nike is betting that Caitlin Clark can own the next iteration of that lineage, not as a copy, not as a gendered counterpart, but as her own singular phenomenon. Caitlin Range. That's the idea they're quietly planting, and once that idea takes root, it becomes self-sustaining, because when kids start shouting a name after a shot, the brand has already won. That's why this matters so much beyond a single campaign. Nike isn't just selling shoes or apparel here. They're trying to fuse Caitlin Clark's identity with the most exciting act in basketball. The deep three, the shot that feels like defiance, the shot that silences crowds or ignites them, the shot that makes people jump off their couch before the ball even hits the net. There's a reason Stephen Curry has been the most popular player in the sport for a decade. And it's not just championships. It's spectacle. It's anticipation. It's the feeling that something impossible is about to happen. And then watching it happen anyway. Caitlin Clark taps into that same emotional circuit. She sells jerseys at a rate that forces uncomfortable conversations. She draws viewership numbers that challenge long-held assumptions. And most importantly, she brings casual fans into the orbit of women's basketball without asking them to adjust their expectations of excitement. The excitement is already there. Nike just needed to stop overcomplicating it. What makes this partnership potentially Nike's most profitable long-term bet isn't just Caitlin Clark's current dominance. It's her inevitability. There will always be debates. There will always be other talented players. Paige Bueckers might end up being a better all-around player in some alternate timeline. That world exists. But even in that world, Caitlin Clark's game is the one that moves people. It's the one that fills arenas, drives clips, and turns highlights into shared experiences. There is no other female basketball player whose style naturally creates moments at this scale, this consistently. That's why comparisons to Magic Johnson or Luka Doncic make sense in this context. Not because the games are identical, but because the gravitational pull is. Some players bend the sport around them. Some players turn routine possessions into events. Caitlin Clark does that every time she crosses half court. She creates tension just by dribbling. And Nike finally figured out how to package that tension without diluting it. There's even a world where this seeps into gaming culture. Imagine a 2K badge called Caitlin Range. It sounds absurd until it doesn't. We've seen this before. Dreamshake became immortalized because it represented something only one player could do at that level. Limitless range already exists as a concept, but names matter. Labels stick, and if enough people associate impossible distance with Caitlin Clark, the ecosystem will follow. That's how legends are built now, across platforms, across mediums, across realities. At its core, this campaign works because it respects the audience. It doesn't talk down, it doesn't explain why Caitlin Clark matters. It assumes you already know, or that you're about to find out the fun way. It invites participation instead of demanding attention. And in a media landscape saturated with forced virality, that restraint feels almost radical. Nike deserves credit for this because they could have played it safe. They could have leaned on generic empowerment language or leaned too hard into legacy comparisons. Instead, they chose playfulness. They chose audacity. They chose to let Caitlin Clark's most thrilling trait lead the conversation. And by doing that, they unlocked something that feels bigger than a marketing push. They unlocked a phrase, a feeling, and potentially a generation-defining association. If this continues,